And who do you see on the horizon for 2028 in the Democratic primary?
Right now?
Yeah.
Bernie and AOC.
No.
They got the biggest crowds.
That doesn't matter.
It won't sustain itself, but right now they have no leader. Okay? But this is the thing the Republican Party has to understand too. Both parties lost in the last election. Trump won, okay? And I don't know if that's going to transfer. We should have won 4 more seats in the Senate. If you looked at the last 70 races for the Senate, 69 follow exactly the way
I think it's Moore versus Youngkin. That's where I see it.
Youngkin would be.
Youngkin is
going to go back to
adjacent, and then Vance and Jr. will fight it out for that crowd.
But AOC and Bernie, and who's at the top of the ticket?
They're going to lead right now.
Who's at the top of that ticket, Kevin? Because if it's not Bernie, he's going to be vice president and then wait his turn?
No, it would be. Bernie's been running each time. I'm just saying who's in the lead right now. I don't think that's how it ends up.
But big crowds don't necessarily mean who's the right candidate. You know, when I started
but it drives where the ideas are going to go. It's going to drive the money.
Just a few days ago, I talked about the first round of Bill Maher going after Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for what he described as anti-American rhetoric. But that moment was only the beginning. While that clip was making the rounds, a second wave was quietly building in the background. Stronger, sharper, and much harder to overlook. Now it's finally here and ready to go. Before we dive into it, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the moment when things really start heating up.
Who do you see on the horizon for 2028 in the Democratic primary?
Right now?
Yeah.
Bernie and AOC.
No.
They got the biggest crowds.
That doesn't matter.
It won't sustain itself, but right now they have no leader. Okay? But this is the thing the Republican Party has to understand too. Both parties lost in the last election. Trump won, okay? And I don't know if that's going to transfer. We should have won 4 more seats in the Senate. If you looked at the last 70 races for the Senate, 69 follow exactly the way.
I think it's Moore versus Youngkin. That's where I see it.
Youngkin would be.
Youngkin is going to go back adjacent, and then Vance and Jr. will fight it out for that crowd.
AOC and Bernie, and who's at the top of the ticket?
They're going to lead right now.
Who's at the top of that ticket, Kevin? Because if it's not Bernie, he's going to be vice president and then wait his turn?
No, it would be. Bernie's been running each time. I'm just saying who's in the lead right now. I don't think that's how it ends up.
But big crowds don't necessarily mean who's the right candidate. You know, when I started...
but it drives where the ideas are going to go. It's going to drive the money for a while.
It doesn't make them the winner.
Right from the outset, Bill Maher dismisses the idea of a Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez ticket. To him, it would simply repeat what he sees as the failed pairing of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, new names, but the same disappointing result. The conversation heats up when Kevin McCarthy pushes back, arguing that Sanders and AOC could signal the future direction of the Democratic Party. Maher, however, remains unconvinced. He doesn't waver or soften his stance. Instead, he doubles down and delivers a blunt, unfiltered conclusion, one so direct that it could shake the very foundations of the Democratic National Committee.
You have to wait till you'll get 2 years out, and then you'll start seeing these governors that start showing solutions. You also have to know, what is the issue going to be? Are we going to have a foreign policy issue? Are we going to have an economic issue? And who's been the best in leading in that? But right now for the Democrats, who's going to lead for the next 2 years? The money is going to... AOC outraised everybody in the House.
And it's all small donors.
It's all small donors.
Yeah.
And this is exactly where Trump was when no one gave him a chance at 17. He outraised everybody else. So that's where the base is at, right? And so what will happen, it'll move after the next midterm election.
Before we roll the clip of Bill Maher, it's worth addressing a comparison that keeps popping up, placing Donald Trump and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the same political lane. Many critics say that comparison misses the bigger picture. While Trump did generate strong support from small-dollar donors, that alone wasn't the core reason his base rallied around him. His supporters weren't primarily motivated by ideological purity or strict party loyalty. Instead, they were drawn to the agenda he championed, his blunt America First message, which they believed put their concerns and priorities at the forefront. For many voters, Trump represented a pushback against what they saw as a sharp shift within the Democratic National Committee, particularly during the prominence of Kamala Harris. Those critics often pointed to issues like immigration enforcement, large federal spending proposals, and cultural debates around traditional norms as reasons for their support. Because of that, critics argue that drawing a simple parallel between Trump and Ocasio-Cortez oversimplifies the motivations behind voter behavior. In their view, Trump became the symbol of a broader populist movement, while AOC is often seen more as a political symbol than a driving policy force. With that context in mind, Here's why Maher questions the idea of a Bernie Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez ticket.
What do you think of the fact that the people who are getting the big crowds right now are AOC and Bernie Sanders? They're going around the country. Thank you, there's that same guy. I call him the always wrong guy. Okay, but I feel like, big crowds, again, the shiny object that the Democrats chase. It's not about the big crowds that come out to you when you're talking in a festival or wherever they are. I think it's because I think Bernie showed up at Coachella. That must have been fun for the fans. It's who shows up on Election Day. And I just don't see that's the ticket. I mean, Cory Booker, I know you've worked with him. I like Cory a lot from my home state of New Jersey. Made a speech for 25 hours. Again, just whacking each other off. This is just not what's going to get the job.
Bill Maher doesn't sugarcoat his point. He delivers it directly and without restraint. Sure, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders are attracting large crowds and generating plenty of excitement. But Maher points out that not long ago, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz appear to have that same unstoppable energy, overflowing rallies, glowing media coverage, and celebrity endorsements from figures like Beyoncé and Taylor Swift. On the surface, it looked like a guaranteed victory. But when Election Day arrived, the results told a different story. The excitement, the star power, and the media buzz ultimately didn't translate into enough votes. Maher's message is simple: enthusiasm can be deceptive. Loud applause at rallies doesn't always turn into ballots in the voting booth. In his view, the left risks confusing spectacle with real political strength and mistaking hype for genuine voter support. And according to Maher, the next argument he raises may be the one that truly rattles Democrats.
The Democratic Party should put the people out there who the people want. They should put the politicians out there who the people want, who they're asking for, who are meeting the moment with the same energy that
they're not asking for AOC.
Yes, they are.
The people you party with are.
No. The people I party with don't like AOC.
Oh, please.
No, they don't at all.
Well, most people don't.
But
she's
AOC,
very far left.
Let me tell you why I'm saying that. Because because people will vote for AOC and Donald Trump on the same ticket. Because they're authentic. No, because they're authentic.
I don't think that, Don.
I think you're wrong about that.
What people like about people like Trump and Fetterman is because it's irrelevant to her life.
But you don't know her life.
I know that being a gorgeous woman who I wouldn't even know was Hispanic in a city that has 1 million Hispanics and does not treat them badly.
But that doesn't mean she doesn't struggle. That doesn't mean that she was set down in
implied.
Bill Maher doesn't hold back when talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and what he describes as an authenticity issue. In his view, she sometimes struggles to resonate with everyday Americans because her presentation can come across as more scripted than natural. Maher argues that over time she has leaned heavily into a narrative of marginalization connected to her background, something he believes doesn't fully match the reality of representing a diverse and strongly progressive place like New York City. Maher questions whether that portrayal reflects genuine experience or a calculated political approach, suggesting it often plays better on social media and within activist spaces than with the wider public. For him, that disconnect between the message and how it's perceived by mainstream voters is the central problem. It might generate applause in certain circles, he says, but it doesn't automatically translate into broad electoral support. And according to Maher, that's only one part of the criticism. He goes on to argue that much of her public image feels carefully crafted rather than entirely organic.
That doesn't mean that she was set down in a Hispanic ghetto in the Bronx and had to deal with that growing up, and that she's come from a working class family.
It implies that in some way she's behind the 8 ball because of that, and it's just not true. And so
I don't know if she's behind the 8 ball, but I don't think she's as privileged as many people who are in Congress right now.
She's not privileged or not. She was a bartender.
Yeah.
So I was a delivery boy.
But I'm saying sometimes, Bill, you don't agree with Donald Trump's policies.
No.
But that's what the people want.
Some of them.
Whether you like her or not, I don't like what she did with Amazon in New York, but I think AOC she's a Democratic icon.
Did Don Lemon really call Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez an icon of the Democratic Party? For many critics, that statement says more about the party's current trajectory than about AOC herself. They argue that when social media reach and viral moments begin to count as leadership credentials, it hints at a deeper identity challenge inside the Democratic National Committee. In their view, the party isn't only facing a messaging problem, it's struggling to elevate figures who can connect with voters beyond its most progressive wing, But that isn't even the main point raised by Bill Maher. In the clip, Maher focuses on AOC's origin story and questions how it has been presented to the public. He suggests that the narrative of rising from severe hardship has been carefully polished politically, arguing that her ascent was driven not only by personal determination but also by strong backing from organized progressive movements. Maher's broader argument centers on perception. A message that excites highly engaged online audiences doesn't always resonate with more moderate, middle-of-the-road voters. According to him, that gap between activist enthusiasm and broader public sentiment could eventually turn into a serious political liability.
I think that's the direction the country should, the Democratic.
I'm not saying the policies that she espouses that's the direction, but I'm saying that you have to give the people who are out front speaking for the party, not the people who are.
If you think
she's evolving,
yeah, she's evolving,
and
as we all are,
and she is moving into
right.
She understands the game a little bit more, and if you notice, she is sort of becoming a sort of normal kind of Democrat in many ways.
Yes.
I think she's evolving.
Okay, great.
She's a very smart tactic, and she's very smart.
Let's get behind that.
Bill Maher ventures into a topic many commentators tend to sidestep, pressing Don Lemon about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. During the discussion, Lemon concedes that AOC remains a highly polarizing figure across the country. Maher takes that point further, arguing that strong visibility and massive online engagement don't necessarily translate into broad electoral support. His focus is on electability. While AOC clearly energizes a dedicated progressive base, Maher suggests that some of her policy positions and rhetoric may sit too far left to unite a larger Democratic coalition. In his view, positioning her as a national standard-bearer could deepen divisions within the party and potentially give Republicans an advantage in a future presidential contest. Maher frames it as a strategic caution. Enthusiasm inside activist circles doesn't always carry over to working-class voters or key swing constituencies. He also notes that voices outside traditional media, such as podcast host Joe Rogan, have raised similar doubts about how an AOC-led ticket might resonate on a national stage.
My favorite interviews was when AOC was talking to that lady and she asked her to expand.
About Israel-Palestine?
Oh my God.
Well, I believe absolutely in Israel's right to exist.
She just collapsed into herself?
It's literally like a fifth grader that didn't study.
Looked at that incident more through just as an incident.
And then they ask you about the subject, or you didn't read the book. Well, you know, it's about Billy and his dog.
What people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of Palestine, is...
But the crazy thing about that interview is that so her first comment comes off with like total authority.
I am a proponent of a two-state solution.
One little follow-up question. Question's like, well, what do you mean by that? And then you just see her get weaker and weaker.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
But what do you mean about that? It's like, I don't know what I'm talking about, man. Yeah. And she literally goes, I'm really not the expert.
Do you think you can expand on that?
I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue.
Critics argue that beyond accusations of hypocrisy, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez often appears confident in interviews but becomes less comfortable when discussions move from broad themes to detailed policy explanations. According to them, she frequently begins with sweeping statements and familiar progressive talking points, yet struggles when pressed on figures, legislative processes, or the practical mechanics of implementing her proposals. Supporters would counter that many politicians rely on structured messaging in fast-paced media environments. However, detractors claim the difference becomes clearer when follow-up questions require specifics rather than general slogans. In those moments, they argue, the gap between branding and policy depth becomes more noticeable. This is where Bill Maher places his broader critique. His concern, he says, goes beyond ideology and focuses on electability and credibility. Maher suggests that if voters begin to perceive style outweighing substance, a high-profile figure could shift from being an asset to becoming a political liability for the party.
The one who's doing that, Gavin Newsom, who I've always been a fan of and thought always could and should be president. And then I recently had a conversation with somebody and I said, gosh, I've always been hoping Gavin would move toward the center and it doesn't seem to be happening. And then, as if I had just manifested it, I see this headline somebody sent me a few days ago. Gavin Newsom name-checked me in how much he wanted to, or how he wanted to move.
Because he's starting a podcast.
Yes.
Where he wants to talk to dissenting
everybody.
voices. Yeah.
So I'm like, thank you, Jesus.
When the conversation turns to who should lead the Democratic Party into the future, Bill Maher has at times pointed to Gavin Newsom as a stronger alternative to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Maher's reasoning is that Newsom brings executive leadership experience, national visibility, and a level of political polish that could make him more formidable on a presidential stage. On the surface, he appears seasoned and media-ready. However, critics of Newsom present a very different perspective. They point to the devastating wildfire seasons in California, arguing that the government's response often seemed reactive rather than preventative, leaving many communities frustrated. Others highlight the persistent homelessness crisis in cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, claiming the situation worsened during his time in office. Then there's the controversy over his dinner at the French Laundry during strict pandemic restrictions. A moment critics say contradicted his public messaging and raised questions about fairness and accountability. While some see Newsom as a skilled communicator and a strategically positioned national figure, detractors argue that political polish alone isn't the same as principled leadership. For them, the real test isn't how a politician performs in front of cameras. It's how they lead when the pressure of governing is at its highest.
Here is the dilemma for Democrats. Their young people, their key constituency, not only don't like their own civilization, they like the wrong one. They actually think Hamas is a liberation movement. They chant for the Houthis. They're chanting, "We will honor our martyrs" at Yale. They're looking for love in all the wrong countries. At an AOC Bernie Sanders rally in Idaho last month, someone threw a Palestinian flag over an American flag, and the crowd erupted in approval. What should have happened after that is one of the adults on stage should have told their young, loyal followers, this is not a symbol of freedom. This is.
When the conversation turns to who should lead the Democratic Party into the future, Bill Maher has at times pointed to Gavin Newsom as a stronger alternative to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Maher's reasoning is that Newsom brings executive leadership experience, national visibility, and a level of political polish that could make him more formidable on a presidential stage. On the surface, he appears seasoned and media-ready. However, critics of Newsom present a very different perspective. They point to the devastating wildfire seasons in California, arguing that the government's response often seemed reactive rather than preventative, leaving many communities frustrated. Others highlight the persistent homelessness crisis in cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, claiming the situation worsened during his time in office. Then there's the controversy over his dinner at the French Laundry during strict pandemic restrictions. A moment critics say contradicted his public messaging and raised questions about fairness and accountability. While some see Newsom as a skilled communicator and a strategically positioned national figure, detractors argue that political polish alone isn't the same as principled leadership. For them, the real test isn't how a politician performs in front of cameras. It's how they lead when the pressure of governing is at its highest.